This is Heart.
Obviously, in lockdown, the museum has been closed. So how has your life been over the past few months?
Strange. I knew it was, we sort of had a little bit of a warning. We had a week where things we'd closed the museum, but we weren't at home yet. So there was that sort of lag. So I did go home laden down with lots of reference books, looking ahead a few months and thinking, what am I going to need? So I carried home lots of stuff about the history of Stevenage so I could keep answering questions.
During lockdown, what's the most fascinating historic thing you've learnt about Stevenage, Joe?
Oh my goodness! Talk about
It's like a test.
Yeah, it is. It's like, well, you know the way it's a bit like when you do history at school. You sometimes have gaps in your knowledge. So I've worked in Stevenage a fair while now, and I know quite a lot about the history of various parts of it. And I certainly know the post-World War II story, you know, the Newtown story quite well. I've done different projects as I've worked there. But I didn't know a lot about the Second World War. So that was quite an interesting one. The fact that they built Mosquito aircraft in Stevenage.
You've absolutely hit upon my favourite subject, the Second World War. I mean, I could literally talk all day about it. So I'm always fascinated. The fact that mosquitoes were built in Stevenage, that's incredible, isn't it? That's just amazing. So let's come to Stevenage in 100 Objects then. Where did this idea come from and what's it all about? Explain what it is.
Well, it came from Craig, actually, but we had a very similar idea in the past.
Well, let's introduce Craig Maret. So, Craig, tell me who you are. Obviously, you're Stevenage born and bred, but what do you do normally?
Normally, I'm a filmmaker. So, basically, mostly within community media would be a good way to describe what I do. I've worked from doing community work from a place called Bowesline House in Stevenage, which was a youth centre it still is a youth centre, but I used to do stuff there. I used to run a youth radio station.
Where do you start with 100 objects for history for Stevenage?
If you look around Stevenage Museum, it just, it takes you, like any museum, usually takes you through from, prehistoric to modern times. So Stevenage obviously quite loaded with modern times, it being the big new town here, but there's an awful lot of history that goes before that. When you wander around, it will be easy to see where you start from. You just look at the objects. There's some absolutely beautiful, fantastic objects in there.
Craig, I must ask you: have you got a fascinating Stevenage historic fact that you can give me? It's only fair that I ask Joe.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know where to start really with that. It's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, some of the things that we've filmed already. There's two objects that I found. I mean, they've been humbling to hold. That's one of the perks, actually, of doing this, is being able to film these objects and get really close to things. One is the exploding rat from Special Operations Executive. Were based in Aston, just outside of Stevenage, in Aston House. In that photograph, that ended up being Stevenage Development Corporation in 1954. Previous to that, it was a place called Station 12, where they built basically traps that they would then give to resistance fighters all over Europe. And so there's an exploding rat. I'm not sure it is the actual exploding rat. Exploding rats. My most fascinating object has got to be there's a breastplate from the English Civil War.
Joe, if people want to learn about Stevenage in 100 Objects, how do they go about it? Where do they go? What do they do?
Well, at the moment, we've got a page on our website. So we're part of the council, and my lovely colleagues in the council website team have put us some embedded video. So the idea is we'll add to that page but we're also going to use it because it's such a great opportunity. We are going to share it via Twitter and via Facebook as well. But I think the legitimate place to go, the place that is the Borough Council's website, and they'll definitely all be there.
This is Heart.